the public that are in the audience today. My name is Satya Rhodes Conway. I'm the chair of this committee. If you wish to speak, there are forms on the table outside the door, and you would need to fill one out. And Lauren, should they give them to you? And give them to Lauren with the laptop down there. We would take that up under the third item on our agenda, which is public comment. We can also, if you have something that you specifically want to comment on, we can make accommodations for that in the agenda as well, but we do need you to fill out a form so that we know that you're interested. Staff, I trust, has taken roll. Okay. So the first item is approval of the minutes. You should all have a copy. I would entertain a motion. Thank you. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes as written? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Do we have anyone interested in public comment? Okay, not seeing none, we'll move on. Which brings us to disclosures and recusals. Just a reminder that when and if we have items in front of us for voting, we expect members to either disclose interest and or recuse themselves on the items if they have a financial or other type of interest. We don't have any voting items on today's agenda, so I don't think this is relevant, but does anybody have any comment? Okay, great. So then that gets us a little bit more into the meat of things. We have a few updates and announcements from staff. And Bill, do you want to give your several?
Sure. Just real quickly, at your place is the meeting schedule for 2018 for our regular monthly meetings. Hopefully we won't be meeting all the way until December, but we thought it was better to just make sure everybody had those on their calendars. So we tried as much as we could to meet on the second Tuesday of the month, like, as a result of our survey. But we ran into quite a few, particularly the second half of the year, that conflicted with other things going on, like elections and common council budget meetings and types of things like that we can't meet on. So we just tried to kind of work that the best we can. So please note that these meetings aren't always falling on the second Tuesday, and also they're going to move around a little bit. So in particular, the next two meetings, so the meeting on March 13th is going to be at the Goodman Community Center where we had our first meeting. And then the April meeting is going to be at the Goodman Library on Park Street in South Madison.
Don't confuse the two.
Yes.
It is my request that we move around the city because it's a site of citywide importance, and that allows different communities to have access to our meetings with more ease. So I expect that throughout the year we'll try and find different sites that can accommodate us. You will also notice that we are being taped, or I think we're taped, not live, for the award-winning Madison City Channel. And that was also a request, at least for these first few meetings, when we'll be doing a bunch of background and conversation about planning and transportation issues, and so that folks can access this online. And we'll see as we get farther into our agenda if it makes sense for them to continue to tape our meetings or not. But let me just a note there that the mics are live, and we do need to use them even though they're not projecting in the room. It's for the taping.
Just a quick update on the hiring of a consultant to assist us in this process. I think last time we had just issued a request for proposals, so we got responses back. There is a team that includes some city staff and Ken Open and John Abbas, who are also on the review team. So the team evaluated the proposals, chose a couple finalists, and we are actually interviewing those finalists tomorrow. So, so hopefully at your next meeting, we'll have some more to report on that. I also wanted to note that the new owners of the site are in town and may be joining us later. But I know a member of their team, Nathan Wadier, is here. He was at the first meeting, I believe, but they may be joining us later.
Thanks. I also want to note that Flora Santos from Senator Baldwin's office is here, and the senator is very interested in the site and what happens there, so Flora's available to answer questions or take comment or whatever you'd like after the meeting. Any other announcements or updates from any members of the committee? Great, thank you. So just one note about the rest of the agenda. We have 3 sort of update/discussion items, and then we'll be doing a racial equity and social justice training. And for each of the update items, I'm going to try and keep us more or less on time, but there is time reserved for or included for questions and then some discussion. So I think all the presenters know to not take all of their time, but to leave that, and then just the committee should know that we will be pausing and discussing things a little bit in between each of these items. And first, I believe we have Heather Stouter, our planning director.
Let me get closer to the microphone here. Let's
Do you want
see.
me to change the slides, or do you want to do it?
Oh, I should be able to do it.
All right.
Thanks. All right, thank you so much. My name's Heather Stouter. I'm the director of the city's planning division. And I'll start by just positioning this site with regard to zoning and our in-progress plans that are taking place. And Bill will continue with some recently adopted neighborhood plans, just to show you what we have in the way of planning and zoning for this site and what the city's role is moving forward. So to start off with, this is just a slice of our city's zoning map. Don't need to take away much content from it, but here we are. The Oscar Mayer site itself is a gray area zoned industrial general, or IG, and surrounded by a mix of residential, commercial, and other districts. So just to locate it within the broader northeast part of the city here. It also lies within an urban design district. Here again is the site. It's part of Urban Design District 4, which does have some regulatory framework for design of any new buildings and additions moving forward. Zooming in here a little bit closer, we get a better lay of the land. So here's the Oscar Mayer site in the IG district, or the Industrial General District. And you can see this is our north transfer point. This is in the Industrial Light District, right next door. And then we have a smattering of other zoning districts on and near the site. This small portion right near the front center along Packers is zoned commercial corridor transitional, and that district includes a lot of the allowances for a lot of commercial uses, some residential uses as well. We have some other residential, the orange and yellow surrounding it are the residential neighborhoods near the site. There are a few different residential districts surrounding it. Do want to talk just a little bit about IG and IL and what those districts really do allow at this point in time. And so as you can imagine, in our industrial zoning districts, industrial uses are allowable. A wide range of manufacturing uses are allowable by right in those districts. This is a rare site, I would say, in the central part of the city. We don't have very many industrially zoned properties. Office uses are also allowable as permitted uses or by right uses. I'll get into a little bit about the various types of requests that might be made eventually on the site in order to change uses moving forward. But do want to stress that basically office and industrial are permitted uses that the owner could pursue by right today in the existing zoning on the site. When we think about the city's sort of control or the city's interface with the site moving forward, there are really 3 bodies that I'll mention here with regard to land use. The first is our Urban Design Commission. And again, since this does lie within an urban design district, any change to the site, like a major building addition, new buildings, signage, et cetera, would be reviewed by our city's Urban Design Commission. Now, for some minor changes, our Urban Design Commission secretary may be able to approve things, on an administrative basis. But by and large, any change in the design, physical nature of the site would go to the Urban Design Commission. Our city's Plan Commission would get involved if the owner is seeking any conditional uses on the property, demolition of principal buildings. The city's Plan Commission actually does review any proposed demolitions across the city. And so that's a part where the Plan Commission would be involved, and a public hearing would be needed for any demolition or conditional use moving forward. Now, in the industrial districts, uses such as retail and restaurant do require conditional use review by the city's Plan Commission. And then the heaviest of all industrial uses, a hazardous waste facility, would also tip that threshold and require conditional use review by the Plan Commission. A third one that I just wanted to list was personal indoor storage. And so while warehousing and storage are allowable as permitted use, a U-Haul site or something like that would be something that would require additional discretionary review by the Plan Commission. There's a very, very long list of permitted versus conditional uses on the site, and happy to send that out to the group later. But just wanted to mention a few of the ones that might come to mind.
Without rezoning.
Yeah, rezoning would be a commission too.
Yeah. So my next we look at what types of requests Thank you, Ken, our Plan Commission chair. I know. The Common Council gets involved if an owner requests a rezoning of property or land division. If the property is being divided, new streets are being proposed, the Common Council would be involved in those decisions, following recommendations by the Plan Commission. And so, if there are any portions of the site that rezoning would be of interest to the owner, the Common Council would need to make those final decisions following. Typically an adoption of a special area plan, which is the process that would take place next year following the strategic assessment of the site. And I'll talk just a little bit about the citywide plan, our city's comprehensive plan, which there's an update to. Imagine Madison. How many of you are familiar with the Imagine Madison process that's taking place now? Several? Good? Great. We've really been working closely with the community on an update to the city's comprehensive plan, and hope to complete that update and have it adopted by our council yet this summer. Our goal is a July adoption. During the Imagine Madison process over the past year and a half or so, we've managed to touch about 15,000 community members in Madison have been involved in that process in some way. We've had an extensive outreach strategy using our website, an interactive website for the project, community meetings, and also we've tried something new this year and worked with community partners to form resident panels. And those groups are really focused on reaching groups who haven't been typically represented in our planning processes in the past. Madison hasn't always done the greatest job at reaching people of color, reaching low-income people, reaching people who are elderly, disabled, youth, et cetera. We often see the same people coming to our community meetings, and wanted to do something dramatically different during the Imagine Madison process to really reach out to the communities who haven't had much of a say in many planning processes in the past. The plan will be arranged into 6 elements that you see here. We'll have, and really the Oscar Mayer and greater site probably relate to all of these. I'm going to focus a little bit in on the economy and opportunity and what we've heard within that element from the community, because I think that is probably the most pertinent element to the Oscar Mayer site. This is not something I expect you to be able to read closely and take away from, but just wanted to show you an example of the type of data that we've been gathering from the community. What we've done is we've looked at all of the 6 elements and broken them down into a couple goals that go along with each element, and then strategies under those goals. And so we had about 10 to 15 strategies per element that we took out to a series of public meetings on our website, to the resident panels, and got feedback from all of those groups with regard to, you know, which of these strategies are really highest priority for you, which should the city focus on moving forward. And I just want to point out that, you know, of the strategies related to economic development, the one that really across the board got the highest marks, the highest priority, was number 6 here, to develop more jobs that pay a family supporting living wage for all workers. And so that, again, regardless of the group or groups that we were seeking input from, whether it was community meetings, the web, or the resident panels, you know, all of those groups basically demonstrated that was the highest priority for the city of the economic development strategies. Within economic development, we focused on 2 goals. One had a lot to do with education. I've pulled up the other here. Madison will have a growing, diversified economy that offers opportunity for businesses and residents to prosper. Large, you know, high-level goal that we're focused on within that. And then again, the top priority strategy that I mentioned previously. When we really dug into the public comments, again, we heard from thousands of residents. Many had their own comments on a wide variety of things. We were able to tease out just a few that really related to the Oscar Mayer site directly. And these are some examples of those that really had a lot to do with this site. Again, these are comments that came from individuals, but we wanted to share them with the committee nonetheless. Let's see. With regard to land use, so more of the place-based side of the city's comprehensive plan, we're working on an update to our draft future land use map for the city. And there's not much to see here when you talk about the Oscar Mayer and surrounding sites. I think that the recommendation is to continue with the industrial future land use that's been on the books and long planned. We don't have a recommended change to that land use. Part of the reason for that is that there's this committee, there's the special area planning process that we hope follows this committee's work. We want to make sure that the comprehensive plan isn't leading without the more detailed work that these committees will do over the course of the next year or so. Is it possible that a different future land use might arise within part of this area? Sure. At this point, though, we're still recommending that it generally be industrial and employment uses moving forward. And now I'll turn it over to Bill, who can talk a little bit about the neighborhood plans, the more detailed planning efforts that have been done right around the site. Not so much yet for this specific site, but to the north and east of the site.
Bill, before you start, let's maybe just do another round of introductions. Natalie Erdman, who's the Community and Economic Development Director for the city, is here. And then folks from Reich and Raven are here. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves just briefly?
Hi, or Raven from Raven.
I'm Nate Ellis with Raven as well.
All right. Thanks for being here. Yeah, she's on our agenda.
So I just wanted to touch really briefly on these 2 neighborhood plans that have been adopted by the city that mostly are for the areas surrounding it. Before I do, I just also want to mention Heather was talking about zoning and the IL zoning classification. On this project's website, which the very last slide of this is the website address for a reminder. We did an excerpt of the IL district and kind of stripped out all the other stuff except the use list and what's conditional and permitted uses in that zoning district, just so it's easier for people to look at. So that's there on the website. I'm sure you want to rush home after the meeting and look at that. Right? So the city, so Heather is talking about the comprehensive plan, but the city also often does more detailed area plans because a comprehensive plan necessarily is so broad and covers so much stuff in terms not only of land use, but transportation, housing, parks and open space, economic development, that it has to be at a level up here. So we often do neighborhood plans to take those goals and objectives and recommendations and apply them to a more specific way on a smaller geographic scale, so we can get into a little bit more detail of how a certain part of the city can fit into these bigger goals and objectives. So in 2009, the city adopted the Northport Warner Park Sherman neighborhood plan that included basically the whole north side, but the area outlined in blue is the planning area. All the different colors are the different neighborhoods, but the Oscar Mayer site is like right in here, so you can see it. The line just kind of dips down and catches that. But it doesn't really, in 2009, I think, nobody thought that Oscar Mayer might be not there in the future. If they did, they didn't really want to suggest that in a plan, I don't know. But one of the things the plan did, and this turned out a little more fuzzy than I hoped it would, but so here's the Oscar Mayer site, and on this one, it really focused a lot on the area to the west, the other side of the railroad tracks from the Oscar Mayer site. So the area kind of between Oscar Mayer and Sherman, up to Aberg, Sherman Plaza, right? Northgate, sorry, I get those mixed up sometimes, is in that area. And really a focus of this plan, and it's also reflected really in a more general way in the comprehensive plan and by how this is zoned in our zoning code, really focused on making this a more of a mixed use area, something more than it is now. Something that really focuses on better connectivity, better aesthetics, a richer, more diverse mix of uses. And I should say it also focused, the plan made a number of recommendations about improving the Packers Avenue streetscape, and particularly adding a lot of trees to it. But it didn't really make any Oscar Mayer specific recommendations. So in 2016, the city adopted a neighborhood plan for the Emerson East Econ Park Yahara neighborhood, which is outlined here. So kind of the Oscar Mayer site is up in this corner of the planning area, which basically, I don't know how well you can read it, but that square there, smack in the middle of the site, says, refer to the Northport Warner Park Sherman neighborhood plan for recommendations in this. But these plans are important because although, I mean, this effort that we're undertaking in the special area plan that hopefully we'll follow is bigger than just the Oscar Mayer site. And I think that's what we really want to emphasize with these is we have some adopted city plans that basically cover the areas all around the site. So one specific recommendation in this plan that I think the transportation planners will talk about a little bit later in the discussion. There is a specific recommendation that says build the Oscar Mayer bike path. So I think you'll hear a little bit more about that later. But both of these plans are on the website, this project website, so they should be easy to find. And if you want to get into them in a little more detail, that's an easy place to find them.
Great.
So, speaking of transportation issues.
We're actually going to pause here and talk a little bit about planning. Sorry, Dave. We have maybe as 15, maybe even 20 minutes if we want them. So the first thing that I want to do is just see if there are questions for either Heather or Bill on anything that you saw, heard, didn't see, didn't hear from the members of the committee. Okay, so maybe can you bring, go ahead, Rebecca.
Actually, I have a question about the tube in the hallway. The commercial quarter transitional part with the Union Building and Sims and the house.
Sure.
Have the new owners purchased that land, or is that carved out of the site? Have you guys bought that? The land with the Union Building and the, no. So I guess I just have in thinking about it, I'd like us just to keep that in mind, that that's still there and it's zoned differently. And I don't know what the owners of any of those buildings are, what their intentions are, but do you guys have any information about, have you talked to the owners of those buildings at all?
Not to my knowledge, not
No.
recently. And we haven't been approached by them
Okay.
either, but that's a great point.
Alder Palm?
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate, at some point, this committee has to also have the discussion about what the jurisdiction that we're looking to engage in, because I think the resolution is sort of written a little vaguely because there is the conversation about properties outside the Oscar Mayer. I mean, I'm not even specifically talking about, say, the Union Hall, but certainly, there are adjacent properties that we could be having conversations with, and certainly if there's some people who have talked about having residential on the space, but then if we actually look back at, as indicated, that there could be mixed use and residential adjacent to it, and then maybe we say, well, then this site isn't, but that site's where we would put that, or how would we? So I just, because you did, I think you did a nice overview, but I just want to remind people that, I mean, we're here to talk about the area. And I also, one thing that you haven't talked about, which could conceivably be in the area, is, of course, across Aberg and the Pancratz Shopko area, because that's still underdeveloped. And so where it's, so you could, I mean, that might be another thing for us to sort of talk about over time too, is how that parcel fits into all of this stuff too.
Yeah, thank you, Alder Palm. That's actually an excellent segue, and I appreciate it. Let me say just a few words about what I've heard from staff, and obviously you guys can all chime in on your own as well. But I think that there's a sort of a mix of short-term and long-term things that this body needs to talk about and ultimately make a recommendation to staff and the council on. And the first are sort of the practical, when and if the new owners come to the city with requests for demolition permit or conditional use permits or TIF funding or any of these sort of something less than rezoning approvals, that I think staff and the council would want to have some guidance or some input, at least from this body, on what we might be interested in with respect to those things and what we might want to have as part of the conversation around those approvals. And so that's one thing to keep in mind as you hear all of this and look at the material, and as we continue in on our conversations over the next couple of months. The other thing I will say specifically about TIF funding is that it happens within a district, and districts have borders. And so some thoughts about where the borders of that district should be from this committee would, I think, be entirely appropriate. And then similarly, and we've been specifically asked to talk about the boundaries of the special area planning process and what should be included. And so Alder Palm had brought up the Shopko area. We're already talking sort of about the rest of the site that's owned by Hartmeyer, where the wetlands are, and then there's all sorts of adjacent issues, and that's part of why I think we need to talk about what the neighborhood plans have said, is that it sort of speaks to the surround here. But I think, again, you should be thinking about, as you learn more about the area and the planning processes that have happened here, what you think the right boundaries are for a special area plan. Because I expect that we'll want to say something about that again over the next several months. So just keep that in mind as part of our charge, I think. What I'd like to do, and Heather, if you can go back to some of the Imagine Madison pieces, sort of what the top line recommendations are on, maybe stay on that, the almost unreadable table.
Okay.
Because this is, if I'm correct, this is the list of all of the strategies that were in the plan and that people sort of weighed in on how they felt about them?
These were the strategies that we took out to the public in many different ways to try to get feedback on and get their ideas for how to prioritize moving forward. And I think
And the darker the color is in those columns, the more
Yes.
people thought it was important.
yes, and we did separate by source, community meetings, the website, and the resident panels, so that our decision makers could see, well, where were the areas of emphasis and how do those differ from the different groups that we were hearing from.
Great.
And can I just
Yeah.
add to that this is heavily based on the city's Connect Madison plan that was developed also with a lot of public input a couple years ago, that a lot of these strategies are pulled directly
Right.
from that plan. So it's it's very deep. There's a lot of deep thought and engagement with those.
Alder Palm?
So, I mean, just out of curiosity on this stuff for our purposes, is the actual comprehensive plan going to include all 13 of these strategies, or are you going to, based upon those public rankings, either prioritize them or only present 7?
Great question. We have a staff team really working on that exact question right now. What we're finding is that as we work back through all the public feedback, there are some that clearly rise to the top, but others that still might be worth keeping that aren't in those top 3 within each theme. We're working to combine some and also to reword a few so that we're maintaining, I'm going to guess we'll maintain 7 or 8 within 7, 8, 9 within each theme. And again, this is one of the 6 themes. And so we'll probably in the end have under 60 strategies in the plan.
And I'm just saying that for the purposes of our discussion is, I mean, while this is just a preliminary list of 13, so right
Yep.
now we can't just say, oh, you know, that, I mean, I look at things like promote food-based business innovation, which on this didn't rank very well, but clearly has been a conversation for a former food production site. So it's sort of an interesting juxtaposition about how, you know, what the data say versus what, there's a
Right.
sort of other perceptions out there.
As we work to draft the plan over the next month or so, we'll be really grappling with those issues and hope to, I should mention to this committee and everyone, we hope to introduce a draft of the plan on April 10th to the Common Council. And so that will be well within the time frame of this committee's work.
Great. So this is a question that I'd like to spend a little bit of time on and hope that each of you might have some thoughts about. And the question is, how do we, so this is obviously lots of thought, lots of input went into this, but this is on a citywide level. And so how do we, I guess 2 questions. One is, what Alder Palm raised is, what do we feel is most important in this site and in the area that we're talking about? But then also, given that there's at least a few sort of clear priorities that have risen up based on the feedback, how would we think about those in the context of this site and this area? So when we're thinking about, living wage jobs, when we're thinking about supporting small businesses and cultivating entrepreneurship, we're thinking about retaining and attracting businesses to promote access to jobs. I mean, so you can pick out which ones you feel like rise to the top there. What does that mean for this site and for the surrounding area? And how do we think about that in the context of our work? What do we want to bring forward from this to incorporate into our work and our recommendations going forward? That's my question to you. Yeah.
I think that there's a whole slew of issues up there that generically cover any sort of business property in the state. We clearly want to be able to attract new businesses to ensure quality jobs and pay a living wage and so forth. But one of the items there that didn't score so well is promote food-based business innovation. And that's one that I think clearly would apply to this site or the study area in general, because if the study area may actually go over to the Madison Public Market eventually, and so there's a community of interest there with the public market and and this site. And likewise, there's another one up there that scored poorly that involves, I'm trying to find it now, in maintaining adequate sites. And I think here too, we want to make sure that as we get requests for information, for instance, at MadRep, in the last couple of years, we've had a very significant problem in providing inventory. There isn't an awful lot of inventory in Madison. And so when we have sites like Oscar Mayer available, it's great for our ability to respond.
Paul, when you say there's not inventory, are you talking about industrial inventory or all commercial?
All commercial properties of 100,000 square feet and above.
Other thoughts? What jumps out at you from this list, or what makes you think about the site? Yeah.
Have you talked to the owners of the property about, have they seen this list, and have they provided any comments in terms of, I just want to go back to one of the very first things that Mayor Soglin mentioned at our very first meeting. Again, they will, again, within the rules and regulations and everything, you know, they ultimately will determine to a certain degree what will happen on that site. So I'm just curious if the owners, if they've been able to look at this sort of information and provide any comment.
It's just a compilation of our input from phase 3 of the Imagine Madison process. So it was just freshly presented to the council and to the Plan Commission within the past week or two. But yeah, we can definitely show the Reich-Raben team far more than just this too, a lot more of the public feedback on the other elements, and we'd like to be able to, you know, share that with the committee as well, certainly. And I think that, you know, part of the setup here was really also a lot of thought about, well, what can be done on the site now that the city doesn't have much of a say on, you know, and that's part of the permitted use versus conditional use and how it's positioned from a zoning standpoint. There's a lot that can happen on this site. We're very excited to work with the owner moving forward, and
I won't
probably
put
be a
you on the
mix.
spot right now, but anytime you want to say anything to this body, feel free. Yeah, no, I'm not asking for comment. Obviously, let you think about it. But, yeah.
We haven't seen this, or I've seen some of the special planning areas, just when we were reviewing our due diligence to try to understand what it was. And, you know, for reading it, I realized nobody's really thought about what they were going to do. So.
Yep. Well, but let me just extend the invitation at any of our meetings. You're certainly welcome to hear from you, and you're always welcome to attend and talk. Other questions or thoughts? Yes.
I would just add that I think it would be helpful to see the list of the other five that you have. Just because, I mean, to Paul's point, it may not, or the opinions on, you know, how our stock of developable property might not be on here if you don't have the right people who might have that specific concern in your interview population. So, but I think there's a lot of other things that this site would accomplish in its redevelopment that don't necessarily directly apply to economy and opportunity. So.
Yeah. Yep, that's a very good point. Larry?
And you know, initially I was like, well, why don't we just go through this? But since this isn't a real, not the proposed list, I think that's probably premature. But I'm wondering if there is something for when those become more finalized for the committee itself to just go through and sort of somehow prioritize how they see it on the site, so that because I mean, you know, as much as this is a sort of an interesting thing, because we're planning citywide, which is just a stroke of timing, right? And then as a city, we're trying to plan a site that we initially didn't know where it was going, and now we have a much more specific party. Yep. And then to say that they know where this is going is, I'm sure, not. So I think at some point we have to really start getting more concrete here. Yep. And certainly allow for the guidance that we're trying to provide the community through this mechanism. Yep. So I think something like, going through these things as a committee and just sort of thumbs up, thumb downing them might be really useful to just start clearing away some of the decks and say what we really think should happen here.
Chandra?
I don't know if this is possible, but is there a way for these comments to parse them by address, just to see if actually those that are in the near neighborhood had significantly different responses? Because this is citywide, I wonder if, just as a sense as we start to parse them, to ultimately for the site to be successful, it has to work for the larger city, but it also has to work for the surrounding neighborhood. And if there's a clear difference in the priorities, it would be useful to have that. I don't know if that's possible.
Great question. I think that this was not a set of questions related to the Oscar Mayer site at all. It's citywide. What are our priorities for economy and opportunity? That said, within all of our primary ways of engaging with people, we did ask a simple question of what part of the city do you live in? North, south, east, west, or downtown? And so that's about the closest we can get. But we could look at, well, what are the responses of North Side residents to these same questions and sort of cross-tabulate those.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for something scientific, but
Yeah.
maybe a
Yeah, if it's not, if that wouldn't take a tremendous amount of staff time, I think that would be interesting to see. Yeah. And I've noted, Larry, your request to come back when this list is more final and sort of tick through. I think that's a good idea. And I also just want to remind people to sort of hold two things in their minds, right? And there's the sort of initial what might go into the conversation around demolition permits or TIF or conditional use permits, or, that's sort of the places where the city has leverage. And then what might go into the conversation around longer term, a special area planning process, right? And so there's a sort of specific set of things and then a sort of more general goal set of things, I think. And one thing that we might try and do when we talk about economic development is maybe try and parse some of these down to what are the levers, right? Are there things that could be included in a TIF agreement? Are there things that could be a condition of a demolition permit? Like, what are the tools that could actually be used or that we could actually recommend in any of these contexts?
I've had a conversation. But I mean, I agree. I think Paul mentioned this earlier. I mean, the hard part here is these are all really good things, and if we could get 13 points in this strategy and 13 on another, all in the site, it would be amazing. And so the question, too, to the staff and obviously the committee is, what are those, even if they're not something that you could apply in a TIF or a demolition, but what are those things that really drive making this site special? Because, I mean, I agree, good paying jobs, absolutely. I'm not so sure that there's necessarily something that we can, jigger there, but if we talk to the developer about, again, I think promote food-based to business innovation, then we can talk to something about the site. And so that's really going to be the challenge here is how do we get to what is good for the site that simultaneously enhances the city, right? It's got to do both, but I think the city stuff isn't necessarily always going to be applicable to the site.
Other questions or comments before we go on to
I
transportation?
just had one question.
I
It could have
welcome you
been-
to the conversation.
Sorry, it could have been because I was
you're
late,
fine.
so I really apologize for that, or it could be just out of my naivety. But it seems like because we're in a situation here where the site's not truly vacant, I mean, there's work that's going on and development that's happening. Is there a way for us to get an update as we go through on a monthly meeting? Just sort of, I don't want us to be working in a vacuum as the owners are already making decisions. I think that the conversation that we had in December about what the plans were and that there was going to be an auction was a good starting point. But then how do we stay kind of more closely aligned with what's going on in real time versus what we're thinking about in the hypothetical recommendation at the end?
I think that's an excellent idea, and perhaps we can talk about how we make that happen on a monthly basis, and we can, providing we can get a form to Lauren afterwards, but if you wanted to give any update now, I think that would be appropriate. We could take a minute or two on that. I think we need you to come towards a microphone, though, so that we can get you on TV.
So we had a great auction. It's gone well. We're in the midst of taking all sorts of equipment out. We're actually going to cut a hole in the side of the building and do everything you have to do to take out some massive pieces of equipment. So soon you'll see a crane when you drive by, because some of that equipment actually it's bigger than a bus.
The hot dog
It's inside
cooker.
there. There's a hot dog conveyor and a bunch of other things, but we'll be done probably end of March with that whole phase of cleaning it up, get everything out. If you came over and visited today, you'd wonder why I didn't give you a hard hat and tell you not to walk there. It's pretty torn up, and it'll take us probably another month after that to sort of finish getting it into what I'm going to call a showable state in quite a bit of the building, because when you remove the equipment, they just literally cut the pipes, cut the wires, and just leave, and the stuff is hanging, and it's a mess. But we'll go through a process cleaning that up. We've had a surprising amount of interest from a variety of users in this site. We've gotten 9 or 10 letters of intent, actually, people who are interested in coming back and repopulating the site. And, I think some of them will actually come to some fruition here by summertime. Then you'll see some of the buildings with uses and users in them, occupying them in activity at the site. As we spoke the first time around, there really are some great buildings there that are very reusable, and then there's some that are really challenging. And the reusable ones, we'll see some good activity. Once we're done with that part of the process, then we'll really be focused on what do you do with the vacant land, because we have probably 6 site plans, and I could show them all to you. Which one would you like to be the best lie, right? I mean, because I'm trying to do them all, right? Because to some degree, this is driven by users. Who is interested in being at the corner of Commercial and Packer, and what are the opportunities for businesses to be at this location? One of the things that I always like to remind people of is we provide places for businesses to be. We don't create the businesses. And because we provide places for them to be, you're really subject to what does the market want to be there. And this corner and this area is a very interesting area because Commercial is a major thoroughfare. And so that drives a lot of interest from users that I did not imagine would want to be there. It's something certainly to consider, the physical location of this. We actually gave ourselves a name, so we'll tell you what that is. We named ourselves Mid-Madison Commerce Center, because I actually believe it will, in the end, be some type of mixed-use location. It's in the heart of Madison in a lot of ways. You're between the downtown and the north side. You're in the center of a lot of things in the middle of the town. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to be somewhat transformative, right? In what will happen here. So we can share site plans. I get a little leery because they stick in people's minds, and I go, well, that was my best lie that day. I'm just telling you the truth, because we are so subject to someone showing up and go, hey, you know what? I did this awesome demographic study, and you guys are ground zero. We got to be here, right? And we've actually had a few folks show up with that in their minds, and we'll see where it goes. But we'll have I hope we have some expansion of businesses within the Madison area, and a couple net new businesses by the summertime, which is good. Activity is healthy. It just breeds more.
Figured out what you're going to do with the powerhouse?
That's one of my favorite buildings. So if I had it to do myself, I'd turn it into a brewery or something cool, because that building's awesome, right? But some of that's going to be driven by what happens around it, what people's opinions and thoughts are about that location, and what, your opinions and thoughts, and then also the broader real estate world's opinions and thoughts about what is appropriate to happen there. I don't know, I can't tell you what will happen in the Powerhouse today. I know that we're going through the process to untangle all the infrastructure so that we can deal with what the Powerhouse is, because right now the entire sprinkler system is run out of the Powerhouse. You can't really continue doing that. And we can't heat the building next winter.
When we were there, you said we were somewhat thinking about parking garage.
Yeah, so so I've done a lot of work in other urban environments, and so you think about density a lot, and how can you pack things more densely because it helps people want to use transportation. I think this site has a lot going from a transportation perspective with the bus facility and with where it is physically, right? Right now, like this morning, I learned that the ride-sharing lot, they've actually contacted us trying to expand it because that is a transportation node for a lot of folks. They can't get enough parking spots in that parking lot for the ride-sharing. So I think there's some interesting opportunities for that to become hopefully even more of a dense of a node and being used. You know, I was in the car riding today with a Lyft driver, and I said, hey, where do you live? And he goes, oh, I live right across the street from this place. And I said, what do you want to see here? And the guy said, I want to see a cool hipster hangout. And I said, well, what does that mean, right? Like, when you say that, what does that mean, right? Because and he goes, well, I want a place, because there's no place on the north side where I can show up and I can hang out. Where is that place? And that was his comment to me. And I said, well, it'd be great to make that, but I don't know what that looks like today. So we had a conversation. I just think it's interesting. And I think that's where parsing it and having some discussions with the local folks, take some Lyft rides, right? That's what I always try to do, because they tell you.
I'd just like you to know that also across the street from the site is a local cab cooperative that gives excellent insured, police background checked, and fully insured services. You might want to take a ride with Union Cab. Well, you might want to take a ride with Union Cab and talk to some of our cab drivers.
I do. Actually, I rode in a cab on the way from the airport to my hotel.
But my actual yellow Union Cab.
Yeah.
But my actual question is, I've heard, I don't know if it's real or just someone speculating, like, it's a vacant building where they used to do food processing. What about the vermin? Is there vermin control happening?
Oh, yeah, we have pest control and all that kind of stuff, but it's empty. There's no, I don't know what they would be eating other than metal and masonry. And brick.
So you haven't seen a big issue? Okay, thanks.
No, you always get those phone calls, where's the basement? My grandpa told me there was a basement. I want to see it. But there's no basement, right? There's nothing like that. Yeah.
One more question? Oh, sorry, two more questions.
Thoughts regarding the baseball field, right in the Econ Park?
Oh, we don't have any plans or any desire to change what's happening in the baseball field at all. So we're going to continue on letting it be a baseball field and participating with the community and supporting that. So there's nothing to change there.
One more question.
Can you say on the letter of intents the type of uses or sizes?
Some of them are industrial type uses. Some of them are what I'm going to call quasi-industrial, right? Where they're not truly in what I think of as like somebody warehousing or something like that. You know, there's a group that wants to put in makerspace, which actually I think is a fantastic use for the site, because if you're trying to create a community gathering place, I've learned from doing this in several locations, you need a few things, and that's lights, right? Because people start to go, what's happening over there, right? Why are there lights? I see something going on. And then you have to have operations and things that can be seen from the thoroughfares when people are driving, where they become interested. You have to have people there after business hours. You know, it's the downtown phenomenon, right? Why is it always empty? Because we all went home, right? There's no reason to stay there.
What size-wise have you had? Large?
Yeah, I think our biggest users that we're working with is about 100,000 square feet. So, I mean, he's absolutely correct. In the Madison market, there's nothing that is 100,000 square feet. You know, like our cold storage building, that building is about 150,000 square feet, and there's absolutely no building available or like that in the state, right? So we'll take a little time and get that to work. We've had a lot of good conversations with very interested folks. It'll be good. It just takes time. Real estate's never fast. It just isn't. But we'll get there, because I think there's a lot of good support and momentum.
Great. Thank you. And we're going to file that under public comment. So Lauren, if you can have him fill out a little form, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So I think we'll move on to transportation now, and we're going to have to shorten that discussion a little bit, but I think we'll be fine. So Dave Trowbridge is here to talk about transportation issues.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
While waiting for him to come up, I would submit that what we just heard is as important as anything on our agenda. And I would hope we'd have regular updates like that on the agenda, either in the form of some written report from staff that they've gleaned from a conversation, or if Nate and Orly or their colleagues can be here, we'd certainly want to hear that. And if they have the ability, then, for instance, to do a matrix next to the one the staff has already done, saying, yes, we agree with all of these things, or we disagree with one, that would also be helpful.
I could not agree more, and we will work to make that happen. Thank you. Dave?
So transportation, I was asked to talk a little bit about it. I know your mission is to really think carefully about this particular site, but what I want to do first is just take a step back and talk about our city's transportation plan, Madison in Motion, and what its objectives are, essentially trying to provide options for people to not have to drive everywhere, use transit more, bicycle, walk more. Currently, this is how the mode share is. 7 out of 10 trips made for work trips are made by the car. And these numbers are actually, 9% for transit. For a city our size is really quite good. Biking and walking are lumped together in this statistic, but we have about 7% of bicycling to work citywide. What I think is important to illustrate is that if you drill in a little deeper and look at specific census tracts where you have certain conditions available, you're seeing your mode share go much higher. This is for public transit, so upwards of 20 and 30% of people use transit for work trips from these near-in locations where you have very, very strong transit service and where you have relatively short trips. So that combination is important to keep in mind, as well as with bicycling. You see mode share go up much higher in these near-in locations, and also talking about high-quality transportation for bikes, that's a path. So what you have on the east side is the Capital City path. You have the southwest path going parallel to Monroe Street. So again, these conditions are important for people making those different kinds of choices. And so Madison in Motion, we talk about building and operating high-quality transportation for people, but also on the land use side of things, we heard a very good report about of improving density and improving a mix of uses. This is something we've supported and Bill's plans talk about all the time, but a real opportunity, I think, moving forward for the Oscar Mayer site. One of the most important priorities coming out of Madison in Motion is to implement what's called a bus rapid transit system. I think many of you know what that is, but if you don't, it's very high capacity transit, very substantial stations, not just a bus stop, and other characteristics worth pointing out. All day, very, very frequent service. So you don't have to have a schedule handy. You just show up at the station and you know that a bus is going to come. It doesn't stop every block, so it can move through the corridors very quickly. And having that competitive transit service, we think, is going to be very important to our economic development goals moving forward. This shows the initial system that we would like to think about. We just released an RFP last week to continue the planning for this. The council has recommended that we go east to west first. How far we can go is still an open question, given our budget and the scope of what the project's going to be. But ultimately, going north and then south is also going to be important for connectivity. And you can see the Oscar Mayer site is in close proximity to that. So I think we'd like to hear more about how this group could see providing good connectivity to this as it builds out over time. Bicycle system, this shows off-street path. This is the checkered green and yellow areas. And in Oscar Mayer, you see opportunities to possibly link up with that and connect these neighborhoods to that redevelopment location. So a lot of opportunity for biking. And this was brought up earlier too, that there is a possible path connection that was drawn up by our engineering division. This is not on the Oscar Mayer property, but certainly improving the connectivity to that area. We feel people will choose biking to whatever type of development we see in this location.
David, could you show where the proposed Smoky Link was going to be?
That's it.
I think this
You're
is
looking
it.
at it.
Like which part of it? I mean, is this,
This is on the Hartmeyer property, links up to Roth Street, and this is Aberd, and this is commercial.
so those are the railroad track, wait.
This is the
what's that?
railroad corridor.
Oh, that's the railroad, okay.
Right, so it's actually on the property. But it is within the realm of possibility that the rail corridor could be used. It's an active freight line. It's owned by Canadian Pacific. But we've had agreements with the railroads to use the rail corridor for bike paths in many locations, kind of mixed success.
Would you just point out for folks where the transfer point is on there as well? Yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
oriented, is the west at the top? That's,
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about
That's,
that.
I'm like trying to,
Yes,
So Packers is along the bottom.
yeah. Yeah.
okay,
so
all
bicycle
right. I
connectivity-
get it now. All right. Sorry.
This is something we would.
Bending your head.
Yeah. Sorry for that. So I think this, as was alluded to, has a lot of opportunity from the transportation standpoint. Centrally located, excellent in terms of proximity to downtown as well as the surrounding neighborhoods. The North Transfer Point has a very high level of service coming out of it. And again, the park and ride is always packed, and that's testament to the fact that people know there's a very good service serving the university and downtown in particular. Airport is like a mile away, maybe just a little more than a mile away. The interstate highway system access is excellent. Highway 30 essentially is I-94, kind of dead ends right in the city of Madison. It's very good for access to that. It's an active freight rail corridor. I don't know how much thought has been given to whether that's in play to serve the site or whether the rules change and you might think about using it for a different kind of a transportation. That's always a difficult question for us. And then, as I mentioned, the bike path system, providing that high quality option for people who want to choose that. I think that's all I have.
Great.
Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so I will do questions and discussion. We have a few minutes still. I did promise Tori 45 minutes for our training, so we'll try and stay on time for that. But Dave, if I could, I wanted to start with the question of the transfer point in light of our hoped for BRT system. You and I have a disagreement about whether the BRT line should run on Sherman or on Packers. I feel quite strongly it should run on Packers, but we can talk about that later. But either way, right now the transfer point is buried in the block between them. And do you think, and maybe actually, Drew, you're here, right? Oh, there you are. Drew, do you want to just introduce yourself, because you're here for questions as well?
Sure, yeah. I'm Drew Beck, Planning and Scheduling Manager of Metro.
All right. So my question for either one of you is, in light of a BRT system, does it make sense to think about the transfer point being on the BRT line, as wherever that is, as opposed to being sort of separate from it? And is that something that this body should be thinking about?
Well, Metro's GM has told me that if we start east-west, he does not want to move the transfer point. But if we eventually go north, it is the recommendation that that would move over to Sherman, or if they change course and go to Packers, somewhere there, because you definitely want to have that connectivity with the transfer point and the high-powered, high-capacity service.
Other questions, comments, thoughts on transportation? Alder Palm?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I have the same sort of, and at some point I talked to the property owners too, that the transfer point is a gem, but it's potentially not, I mean, because of its current location, it could be polished by potential relocation. So I do think, as long as, obviously the BRT is a whole different can of worms and where it's located in the thing, but I do think that there's better ways to connect to that stuff. And likewise, I wanted to ask Dave, this site is now different, so would you still recommend the Smoky Link path, or?
No, I just threw that out there to illustrate that was thought about to get a better path system through there. It could be part of this property as well. It could be on the rail corridor.
Okay, so that's not, you had designed and proposed that site for other reasons, not necessarily because that was the best place to locate a bike path.
That's right. In engineering, I think specifically, we're trying to avoid the Oscar Mayer site because of some feelings that maybe it wasn't the right opportunity to do that. So maybe that's changed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions or comments on transportation? Anything that you'd like to see I mean, we'll be coming back to all these issues again, I think, but, certainly speak now if there's more information you'd like in the future or things that you want to make sure we get on our agenda. I'm sorry, we can't do public comment because we've moved, yeah, but we've moved past the time when we have public comment. I'm sorry. But I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. One last chance for the committee? All right, thank you both very much. We appreciate it. So that brings us to our last agenda item. And I'm going to introduce Tori Petaway from the city, who's going to do our training. Hi. And I'm just going to hand it over to you, Tori.
I promise to stay brief and on time.
While Tori's getting settled, let me just say that I asked staff to make sure that we had this on our first agenda, our first/second agenda, because I feel like not only do I know that racial equity is a priority for the city, and the city's put a lot of emphasis on it, but also because it is specifically called out in our founding resolution that we think about racial equity in our process and in our recommendations. So I wanted to make sure that we had a foundation going into our deliberations. And so I'm really happy that Tori had the time to be here.
So tonight, when Satya and Bill reached out to me, I was very pleased, but I knew that this project was...
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Just as your big point up here. We need to speak into the microphones because these are feeding into the city channel, so it can be broadcast later. So.
I'm a walker.
Can she walk with that one? Yeah, you can walk with that handheld if you want.
That's connected? Yes.
Oh, okay. Good. Sorry.
And you're not going to hear it. You just
Good,
speak into
because
it.
I don't like to stand still, even though I walk with the limp now. But so thank you for having me here. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to do after talking with Satya and Bill is to provide an opportunity to lay a foundation for the committee to move forward, to do the work of equity as you're thinking about economic development moving forward, right? Because this is a very huge opportunity to do something very wonderful for our community, not just for the north side, but for the whole entire city of Madison. This is going to be a very wonderful opportunity. And so one of the things that I wanted to start off with is just really creating an opportunity to talk about some key concepts and what this means when we talk about bias and our own bias. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do some very elementary stuff tonight. And so my name is Toriana Petaway. I'm the equity coordinator for the city of Madison. I have the wonderful opportunity of doing this work for the entire city. And so my job is to provide oversight for all 26 departments and agencies to look at racial equity and social justice. I lead an initiative for with a team of about 40 to 60 people. It fluctuates depending on how people feel and whether or not their supervisors will allow them to do the work. I'm an office of one with a big job. But I love the work that I do and I'm committed. And I also have the responsibility of supporting our mayor, our council, and our city, all of you, for both internal and external of disseminating equity in all of our processes and discrimination in all of our processes, removing barriers in all of our processes. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to really jump through a bunch of stuff very quickly. I always try to start off with conversation guidelines. You can read, so I'm not going to go through all of this quick, very detail. It's in your PowerPoints, and so I provide it to you. But one of the things that I really want to stress is that I want everyone to feel comfortable to chime in and to participate, right? Because learning is something that if you don't participate, you don't walk away with anything that is meaningful for you. And I want you to feel like that you can, you know, say, hey, clarify, Tori, I didn't get that. You're moving too fast. Please do that. Please use I statements. I don't like to overgeneralize. I'm only going to talk about Toriana Petaway's experiences, not the African American people experience, because I can't speak for all Black folks, right? So use I statements. Learning should happen where if you hear something wonderful or someone says something about their experience and it's personal, keep it in the room, but if it's something really awesome, we should make it viral and take it out, right? Confidentiality, we want to make sure that it stays in here, even though it's recorded, so not that confidential. We want to share space. I am a talker, so I'm going to try to make sure that I give room for everyone else to participate, but if you're not so much of a talker, I encourage you to, you know, kind of speak up, right? Be part of the experience. And we want to avoid making a lot of assumptions in here and paraphrasing stuff, so you have that in your materials. The goals and expectations for tonight is understanding bias as we apply them. We want to make sure that we have a good understanding of the definitions, because as you go through this, I want to make sure that as a framework that you're thinking about equity as a framework moving forward. What is bias? What is my own bias? Not the bias of the people that you are doing the work for, but your own bias, right? Because we're trying to deconstruct dominant culture and how we go about making decisions, right? Because oftentimes you're going to be making decisions for people who are not at the table with you. And you have a community that is very diverse. And so we have to make sure that we're being inclusive. So you want to make sure that as you're doing this, that we're thinking about good public participation and engagement throughout the whole process. That's one of the objectives. Develop an understanding for individual institutional systemic racism and how that shows up in the work. And so we're going to talk about the machine. What does that mean? I want to spend a little bit of time helping you understand what does the machine look like. Because sometimes in these conversations, it's going to get tough as you're making a decision on what should happen and what shouldn't happen. And I want you to be hard on institutions and soft on people, always. Hard on institutions and soft on people, right? And if you can keep that in mind when you're thinking about equity, when you're making big decisions, you'll always remember hard on institutions, soft on people. That's what that one's about. Establish basic understanding of what racial equity and social justice is as it relates to economic development. That's what this whole process is. And explore one's own part in the machine as it relates to this process over and over and over and over and over again. These are some of the key takeaways that I want you to have an understanding. In the city of Madison, this is our mission. Establish racial equity and social justice as a core principle in all of our decisions and all of our policies and our functions in the city of Madison. In the Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative, our three goals is in our operations, in our policies, and for our community. Those are my three goal priorities. So in the initiatives, we are discovering and trying to remove barriers in our policies and procedures, in our budget operations, and for the community. And so those things touch everyone, both internally and externally. And so this is kind of our mission, and I want to make sure that as you're going through the work that you're doing, that you understand that it's touching the work that you're doing as well, right? Why do we focus on equity and why do we lead with race? Here's a small graphics that we use. African Americans, the African American rate of poverty in Dane County, 40.8%. And this is just in Dane County. We know that African American child poverty rate is 57.3%. And the Black ownership in Madison is 17%. And the reason why we focus on race is that if we do not talk about the conversations or focus on the things that is not talked about the most, there are 28 protected classes in the city of Madison. We have the most protected classes in the nation. San Francisco used to be the most, but we got them beat. We have the most everything, the most alders, the most committee boards and commissions. We like being number one in everything. But to be more serious, if we don't address the things that are indicators that have the greatest gaps, and if we don't lead with those things, those gaps will progressively get wider. And so we have to address the things that are the most pervasive first, and we have to lead with race. And when we do that, all of those other classes will get caught up, right? And so we lead with races because it's the thing that we have the most problem talking about and addressing, and everything else would get swept up in the process. And so that's why we lead with race. We want to be intentional about it. And I already said that. So one of the things that I want to do real quick first is to hand you out this. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. One, because you're all adults and you're very smart. And I trust that you can do this exercise very quickly without any trouble. So we're going to spend about 5 minutes doing a quick little exercise. I just want to test your knowledge. And it's a handout with some basic key concepts. Elementary. And I want you to do this by yourself. No pairing up. Just, take your time. Are there any extras? If you like, I have some for the audience. we're gonna bring it back in. I am actually only bringing this to your attention. Guess I need the mic. And I'm doing this is one, because in the work that we're gonna be doing over the next year, 5 years, as this committee convenes,
Here, please.
right? I wanted to make sure that we had a basic level of understanding. One, because oftentimes we use words interchangeably, right? And we think that we know what they mean, and we really don't, right? How many of you, let's be real, did we struggle?
Yeah.
We do. And if you're struggling, then guess what? Our community is struggling as well, right? And the reason why I did this is because I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. And if we're all on the same page with just some key understanding of what we're talking about as we're trying to dissect what we're doing for our community, right? And trying to lead with equity for our community, then we can do a better job doing the work. Because without speaking the same language and having a framework, speaking the same language, we can't check our own bias, right? Because that's bias 101. First, you got to know the language, right? We all have to speak the same language to check our own bias. And that's why I gave you this, because oftentimes we're using words and we think that we're using them and we mean the same things, and we don't. Because you're saying one thing and I'm saying another, and we're all in la la land thinking that we're saying the exact same thing, and we're not. So keep it moving. Let's all get on one accord. Keep that in mind and refer back to it often, right? I'm not going to go through it because there's actually quite a bit that I want to get through. I actually want you to all get up now. I want to do a quick exercise. And we're going to use this side of the wall. So if everyone can come on this side of the wall real quick. And this exercise is called Lay It on the Line. We do this in all of our Part 1 trainings. And I want you to understand that this is a trust-building exercise. It's not about, anything, to shame you or to call you out, but it's called Lay It on the Line. I'm going to ask you a question. And depending on what I say, I want you to either align yourself. I can't clarify the question. Hear the question. If you strongly agree, I want you to stand by that camera. If you strongly disagree, I want you to stand by this camera, and then we'll talk about it. Okay? I make most of my decisions without bias. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. Or somewhere in the middle. Hey, that is a wonderful place to be, because what that says is that we are all biased. Right, that's wonderful. We are all biased. And so we can agree on that. So I'm going to keep it moving, because that's really a good place to be. Right, anyone has anything to say about that? We can all acknowledge that we're all biased, right? Okay. I can easily identify examples of institutional racism. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. Give me an example of institutional racism. Redlining. Ooh, dang, that hurt. That is wonderful. I actually came up with the new institutional redlining. It's not actually new, but I said it today and someone was like, we need to make an illustration about that. Credit check on housing. Even though it's legal now, why do it if you're not buying a house for rentals? That's new redlining. Just in case y'all don't know, it's the new redlining.
Explain, say it again.
Doing credit check for property owners, property managers. It's legal now as of 2017. The state rolled it back, made it easier for property owners to do this. It is the new redlining. For tenants. Right. It is a new form of redlining. Form of discrimination. Just because it's legal don't mean it's right. Okay, let's keep it moving. Anybody else want to chime in on what is an institutional racism or racist thing? Anybody over here? Why are you over here, sir?
Oh, because it's difficult to identify.
Yeah.
If you're in an institution, you may be focused on your own sort of, once again, work projects and that sort. So you may be discrimination going on against you and racism, and you just don't know it.
Right.
It's difficult. If it's institutionalized, it's built within the system.
Right.
It's
just happening. That's good. All right, last one. I believe I can end racial inequities. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. That's good, because collectively we can, but I mean, you know, on either front, that's a little harder. Right. So, yeah, staying in the middle kind of feels good, right? Because it's like,
Depends on how hopeful you're feeling at any given day.
Right. We can't take down the institution, but we can piece by piece dismantle the institution, right? Or parts of policy or parts of a process, maybe, but it's kind of hard, right? Because the institution keeps going, right? All right, so how do you feel about that exercise? How do you feel about your team?
We have to go agree or disagree.
Well, I mean, well, you can take the line and agree or disagree if you want to, but it's a trust building thing. Right, okay. So now I just want to do a time check. Bill?
We're at 5 after 7, so we've got 20, 25 minutes.
Okay. I want to show this video real quick. And this is relevant to the work that you're doing.
This might not be the smoothest transition. I think we have to do the wait there, but we might have to.
There you go. Pop it.
You have to press escape.
So as I
You have to press
yes.
escape.
Thank you.
explore what I wanted to do with my life, I really became so focused on the different access to resources and opportunities that different people have and how that influences what happens generation after generation after generation. So I was always fascinated by power. I was always fascinated by,
That's the top
you know, what makes places the places that they are. Who decided that?
Everybody else can
And
see it.
where's the money from?
Here we go.
And then,
My sister-in-law.
Oh, nope, not that one.
Half black, half white, but looks white. Blue eyes, whiter than most white ones. Very
You
white.
want to stop that one?
She and I, you know, we could
this one?
Mm-hmm. Make it bigger.
Or this one?
Yeah, full screen it.
Here we go.
Go on, you can do it.
So as I began to explore what I wanted to do with my life, I really became so focused on the different access to resources and opportunities that different people have and how that influences what happens generation after generation after generation. So I was always fascinated by power. I was always fascinated by, you know, what makes places the places that they are. Who decided that? And where's the money? money going. And so when I went to urban planning school, I think I was somewhat of an outlier. There were a lot of people there who were drawing maps and writing reports and doing all these technical functions, but not ever stopping to think about fundamentally where are our resources going and how are those decisions being made. Ended up enrolling in a 2-year city and regional planning master's degree. And I thought, great, this is where we'll really get down to these issues that I've been living through my whole life. And when I got there, nobody wanted to talk about power. Nobody wanted to talk about how places became the way they are, talk about money, talk about resources, talk about decision making. There were a handful of us, and in my cohort group of 30 plus, those of us who were asking those questions, we were all students of color. One was from Latin America, one was African American, one was Filipino. There was myself, and one was Chinese. And there we were, the 5 Musketeers. And we had a group we called Students of Color in Planning, where we were trying to fill in the gaps of what we saw the actual underpinning to everything we were learning was, but that no one was talking about.
I'm going to stop that because the next part of this video talks about other things that I think we can talk about at another training. Yeah, honestly. But I wanted to really talk about the young lady's experience, because what she was calling out in her experience in urban and regional planning is that there were 5 students of color. And in their planning process, no one was asking or addressing the issues of what's deeper or beneath just what was being taught on the surface. And that's what I want you to remember as your committee is convening. I want you to remember to go one step deeper than just what's on the surface is what's being presented to you, right? Because you're going to be given a lot of information concerning the blueprints, the size of things, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But remember, you have a very diverse community, and dig deeper than just what's given to you. Because as she pointed out, they weren't talking about the low income, the marginalized, the things that those 5 individuals may have been struggling with or thinking about as it pertained to urban and regional planning from their life's perspective or view. Things that they realized that would be significant, okay? And so that's your job, because you have the task of doing that for a whole community in the city that's going to enjoy this new development. And that's what I wanted to just kind of bring to your attention. Now, what do you see here? Come on, what do you see? Feet. What kind of shoes? What kind of feet?
Kids.
Those are Chucks, right?
Yes.
Right. So we decided to change our equity image. We used to have the kids at the fence looking over the fence, but when I was told that we changed, I was out having full hip replacement. It's like, oh, Tori, we made a change to our slides. And I was like, okay, tell me about it. I'm like, I empowered my team to do stuff without me, so that's wonderful. And so they're like, well, we have some Chucks. And equality is when you tell folks, everyone gets a pair of Chuck size 9. Everybody. You get a size 9, you get a size 9, you get a size 9, you get a size 9. That's equality. You happy with your size 9? Do you wear a size 9?
Hell no.
Do you wear a size 9?
I actually do, yes.
Good. Do you wear a size 9? All right. That's equality. Whether you wear it or not, that's equality. Be happy with it. That's what equality is. Now, equity says everyone gets a pair of shoes that fit. Actually, I don't like Chucks. Matter of fact, I don't even like flats. I actually want a pair of pink size 10 stilettos. I just had full hip replacement, so I'm stuck wearing flats. That's equity, because I get to pick out what I want. Well, I get to get a pair of shoes that fit. So wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. I just get a pair of size 10 shoes. Now, inclusion says, Tori gets to say, whew, I get to get a pair of pink stilettos in a size 10. That's inclusion. I get to pick out what I want, and they're going to be pink, and they're going to be stilettos, and they're going to be a size 10. That's inclusion. Now, let me help some of you people who run operations in businesses or consultants who have to stay in a box in a bubble, right? When that comes into play, you guys have a task of staying within confines. You can say, okay, these are our parameters. Everyone can pick out what they want, but it's either blue, green, red, but you can pick it out in your size. That's still inclusion. I have 20 colors you can pick out, but you can get it in your size. And they don't have to be Vans, because we got a variety of shoes you can pick out. Heels, flats, boots, flip-flops, right? But these are the boundaries.
We're still talking about shoes.
And we're still talking about shoes. Because you got to wear shoes to work, because it's a safety thing. You see how that works? But it's inclusive. But I didn't tell you you just get a pair of 9s and you wear what? Right. Because that's equality. And it doesn't fit you. And your feet hurt in those size 9 shoes, right? All day long. That don't work. You see how that works? So the thing about bias is that we have individual bias, and it often is implicit and explicit. It's hidden. Just like when we were on the line and we talked about institutional, it could be both hidden and explicit, right? Or hidden and implicit. And when it's in the institution, we don't often know what it is sometimes. But you get it in your stomach that something is wrong. Oftentimes you get that gut-wrenching thing like, oh my gosh, something is going on. If it's implicit, you might feel it, but you can't name it. Can we get a head bob on that? You often like, but I can't name it. And sometimes you're conscious of it. When it's explicit, it's in your face, and you know it's explicit, right? I've had situations recently, all of my stuff is in storage right now. I've been shopping for a house, and I've had some very explicit things happen to me. I had a house offered to me to rent, and then told to come and get the keys on Friday, and then apparently a conversation happened, and then it was like, oh, yeah, I resigned from the company. Now you got to deal with someone else, and no longer the house is mine. And so then I said, hey, I got a truck. I got people moving me. What do you mean? It's not mine. You told me to come and pick up the keys. Like, people are going to move me, and what do you tell? I had to put my stuff in storage because I had to be out of my current residence. That's explicit. Just. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, applied for a visa, was going to Netherlands, I already booked my flights and everything, and didn't get my visa on time. It has been actually 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because I'm Muslim, Pakistani passport. So that's kind of like a hurdle. Right. So I called the embassy, I said, I'm flying in 2 days, I need my visa, DC. And I had a feeling there's something, the guy is biased, or it's kind of a racism. He said, well, that's our normal process. When it's done, you will get your passport. I talked to my wife. She's white, American. She made a call on my behalf, And she talked to them, and they sent my passport with a
Right.
visa. They said, okay, we will do that, we will send him. And next day I got my
Right.
passport, and I was so pissed.
Right.
I was like, that's, and
Right.
I can really argue my own case. I don't have a barrier with English language, but somehow my accent and what nationality I have, what color I have, that's
It was
count,
the dog
all those
whistle.
things, yeah.
It was the blatant dog whistle, right?
Right.
And you know it when it happens to you, so that is definitely explicit. And like I didn't get my house and had to put my stuff in storage, and it was explicit. And my stuff is still in storage, but I'll get over that. So I want to make sure that you understand, going back to the concepts, you know, there's prejudice, there's discrimination, and there's oppression. And in all of these situations, you're just like, what does this have to do with economic development? What does this have to do with the project that we're working on? And why is Tori talking about this? Well, because when you're talking about public engagement, not everyone's going to come to the table, right? Not every community that you're representing in this process is going to come to the table. And sometimes one of those definitions is internalized racism or an internalized oppression. You want to make sure that you understand these things, because not everyone that you engage with when you get to that public participation part is going to come to the table, right? And so our planning department did a wonderful job in public participation, really utilized their tools that they've already put forward with you, and some of the strategies that they use. Because some of these things are very pervasive, and they are real, and for you to have a wonderful understanding of that, you need to really embody some of the things that are already best practices and strategies, right? We know that these things happen in our community, and when you have a good understanding of that, we can jump through these hurdles, right? Because people are struggling with these things in our community, and I just wanted to make sure that folks understand that there's a connection in everything. So now, before we do this, I wanted to share this exercise, and then we're gonna have to go fast because my time is gone. Yes, quickly. I wanna talk about privilege. And the reason why I wanna talk about privilege is because I want you to be able to identify your privilege. Everyone has privilege. We all carry privilege, and irrespective of your race and your ethnicity, your sex, your gender, you all carry privilege. And because we carry privilege, I want you to be able to identify how you carry privilege and what that means, and how, because you carry privilege, you become a partner and an ally. So I want you to spend, we're only going to spend like 3 minutes. I want you to spend 3 minutes checking the box at the top of the railroad track that apply to you. Let me find a pen too. Everyone's done? Now, I want you to take a minute, because some of us probably could identify to maybe, I don't want to make the assumption, to things that are below the line. Now, recognize things below the railroad track could be areas where people identify with things that may not be overtly things that you know. They could sometimes be an area of source of shame, or things that are not disclosed, or things that may have happened in your past, maybe not in your present. Or in most cases, if I've done these trainings, people have not checked anything below the line. But please check accordingly if it applies to you.
What is cisgender?
Cisgender is the gender you were born with.
to know.
So I'm going to talk about mine because oftentimes we ask people to volunteer and talk about theirs. I come from a traditional family. I was born in the U.S. and English is my first language. I identify as Christian. I'm food secure. I consider myself upper class sometimes. Have a higher education. I have 3 degrees, working on a doctorate degree. I never know where I'm going to finish that.
Go, girl.
Never. Now, I do identify with some things below the line. I am a person with a disability. I have several disabilities. Some that I don't even like to claim, but I do. Right now, I am housing insecure. I'm homeless. Not homeless like some people on the street, but I am homeless. I am a woman. I am a person of color. I am, let's see, those are the ones that I can identify with. And the reason why I give this with is because we all carry privilege. I want you to understand that. We all carry privilege. We all carry privilege different. And the reason why I talk about the identities below the line, not so much that you may carry an identity below the line, but remember the communities that you're serving as you're on this committee carry privileges below the line. So when you're making decisions or you get stuck on something and you guys get heated in a debate about something, put yourself not in your shoes, but in the people below the line shoes. Try to remind yourself to be that person below the line. Maybe your decision might be different. Okay? Because if it's not you, maybe if you're doing it from their shoes, maybe you'll make a different decision. And the reason why I say that is that as an ally or a partner, we can make better decisions sometimes from an ally point of reference, right? Because the low income, the marginalized, the people who are not at the table carry different identities that oftentimes don't have a voice. And that's why we do this. We all carry different identities, right? And sometimes they don't have power or privilege above the line, okay? And just be aware of that. This is just a simple exercise. Any questions about that? All right. Time check? Am I done?
Yeah, we're about 5 minutes out from when we'll
Okay,
be done.
good. I want to show you this, and then we're going to be done.
You want me to come?
Ooh, do it again.
Half black, half white. But with blue eyes, white as most white.
Hold on.
And so the reason why I showed this is because in every situation that we're in, we always have the opportunity to be an ally, to be a partner, to use our privilege to assist in any situation whenever we're making decisions. These situations happen all the time. And sometimes, oops, how do we get back? Okay, hold on.
You're good. No, you were good. You just
I
have
was
to
good.
go forward.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, there we go. Because we can take every opportunity, every situation as members of this body to use it as an opportunity appropriately, knowing that this is a huge economic development and placemaking space, an opportunity that we're going to be working with communities, public participation, doing very wonderful things within the community. And now that we have an understanding of key concepts, we've talked about our bias and what that means and what equity means in the process. I provided you with the machine. And oftentimes we are individuals in the machine. Sometimes we think that we're gonna address implicit and explicit bias to the individuals and we're gonna make a change, and it doesn't work like that. That's where the least amount of change happens, right? When you're dealing with individuals. The most amount of change happens in the institution. That's why when I said at the top of the presentation, we're gonna be hard on systems and soft on people, right? Because the most amount of change actually happens when you address change in the institution, right? And this is a huge opportunity with this economic development process with the Oscar Mayer project. You have consultants that are here or developers that are going to be coming, potential buyers that's going to be buying and developing properties. You have a committee now that's going to be really reaching out to the community and talking to the community and talking about potential of what's going to happen and how do we make this wonderful for the north side and the broader city. But you need to understand how all of these decisions that you're making, when policies come up or different things come up, how you need to be hard on systems and soft on people within them. Because everyone's going to have a role to play, they're going to have a job to do, and we need to, keep things in perspective as we're doing it. Right? Everyone's going to do their job. They're going to do their job well, but we need to be hard on systems and soft on people, right? And that everyone in the operations can have barriers that we can remove. There could be unintended consequences. We can do analysis to really discover those things in that process. And we have good tools and strategies that's already been laid out for us. And I just kind of want you to kind of remember that. What I'm providing to you as well is just a sheet for accountability. Over the course of the time that you're together for the year, for the next 5 years, here's an accountability. I don't know. How long is this going to last? I don't know. I mean, it could be 5 years.
October, hopefully.
Okay, I don't know. It's a big project. Here's an accountability sheet for each of you, just to check in with each other on where you are. When things get hard, check in with each other, right? Put some tasks down. We'll all have biases. Biases are neither good or bad. Do an inventory and recognize the check-in over a period of time, right? Because when different conversations come up, when the community come or challenge different things, step back, pause. That's what we teach in the Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative. Breathe and say, okay, are we looking at this situation right? Let's pause. Is it us? Are we really looking at this right? And then you want to address individual biases. You want to understand the concepts and its importance. You want to make sure, is the machine at play? Is this a system problem? Or is it a people problem? Or is it an operation problem? Right? Always try to identify where the problem is. And remember, hard on system, soft on people, right? Because when you do that, then that way we can move forward and do good public participation, right? And then all of these things are related to all aspects of our lives. And I just kind of wanted to, say that one of the things that I took away from the Mayor's Neighborhood Conference in 2016 that I thought was exceptional was Mitchell Silver was here, and I listened to his presentation again just the other day because I wanted to be stoked for this. And I put the link on your PowerPoint. If you had not visited or heard that presentation, he talked about economic development and what it meant in the future and what it meant for, cities. I thought that was one of the best presentations I've heard in a very long time. And I thought it was relevant, and I wanted to leave that with you. If you weren't there in the room, go back and listen to it. It just really honed in what it meant to be doing something for the 21st century and what it meant for a changing environment in a community. And so that's what I wanted to leave with you, and thank you, and I hope that this was helpful.
Thank you. And the PowerPoint is linked on Legistar or will be, and also available through our site, I assume, so that we can go back to all of those links if you want to see them again. Just a few things in closing. Our next meeting is March 13th, and it is at the Goodman Community Center at 5:30, so don't come here next month. Or any other Goodman site, don't go to the pool. So what I'm anticipating that will be on that agenda, in addition to inviting the new owners to come and talk with us or to give us a report via staff, we will talk about the role of this site in the larger food system in Madison. We'll talk about the TIF process and have some conversation there. We may get some historical perspective on the site. I haven't quite rounded that up yet, but that might happen. And then we may also talk about environmental issues. But if there are other things that you are interested in getting on either that agenda or a future agenda, please don't hesitate to tell staff, to tell me, or to tell Ken. And we are checking in regularly to plan those meetings. So I'm happy to take requests about agenda items. And then I'll just say for the public as well, we do have all of the committee materials are up on the city's Legistar site. They're also up on a specific webpage for this project, which, Bill, do we have the link for that? Is that? Yeah,
There,
so that is our site. So all the materials and more from this meeting, the last meeting, future meetings, and then a bunch of background stuff as well, I think, is up on that site. And the public is always welcome at our meetings. We do have public comment at the beginning of the meeting. And so you're always welcome to attend and comment. But I'm also happy to answer questions or take, have conversations with people later after we adjourn in this moment. Are there any final comments, questions, or announcements from the committee? Yes, sir.
The issue in terms of updates, is there any updates between now and then? Should we just expect an email or?
Yes. So if there is information to share, it will come from staff, and I'll just remind you that we can't email each other about this because that would be an issue with quorum. But staff can and will be in touch with us, and so if you have something for the full group, the best thing to do is to send it to staff and ask them to distribute it. Bill, anything else from staff or any of the other staff present? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, anyone? All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.